The Shoes of Fortune. Chapter 4. A Moment of Head Importance. An evening's dramatic readings. A most strange journey. Every inhabitant of Copenhagen knows, from personal inspection, how the entrance to Frederick's hospital looks. But as it is possible that others, who are not Copenhagen people, may also read this little work, we will beforehand give a short description of it. The extensive building is separated from the street by a pretty high railing, the thick iron bars of which are so far apart that in all seriousness, it is said, some very thin fellow had of a night occasionally squeezed himself through to go and pay his little visits in the town. The part of the body most difficult to manage on such occasions was, no doubt, the head. Here, as is so often the case in the world, long-headed people get through best. So much then for the introduction. One of the young men, whose head in a physical sense only might be said to be of the thickest, had the watch that evening. The rain poured down in torrents, yet despite these two obstacles, the young man was obliged to go out, if it were but for a quarter of an hour. And as to telling the doorkeeper about it, that, he thought, was quite unnecessary. If with a whole skin he were able to slip through the railings. There, on the door, lay the goloshes, which the watchman had forgotten. He never dreamed for a moment that they were those of Fortune, and they promised to do him good service in the wet, so he put them on. The question now was if he could squeeze himself through the grating, for he had never tried before. Well, there he stood. "Would to heaven I had got my head through," said he involuntarily, and instantly through it slipped, easily and without pain, notwithstanding it was pretty large and thick. But now the rest of the body was to be got through. "Ah, I am much too stout," groaned he aloud, while fixed as in a vice. "I had thought the head was the most difficult part of the matter. Oh, I really cannot squeeze myself through." He now wanted to pull his over-hasty head back again, but he could not. For his neck there was room enough, but for nothing more. His first feeling was of anger. His next, that his temper fell to zero. The shoes of fortune had placed him in the most dreadful situation, and unfortunately, it never occurred to him to wish himself free. The pitch-black clouds poured down their contents in still heavier torrents. Not a creature was to be seen in the streets. To reach up to the bell was what he did not like. To cry aloud for help would have availed him little. Besides, how ashamed would he have been to be found caught in a trap, like an outwitted fox? How was he to twist himself through? He saw clearly that it was his irrevocable destiny to remain a prisoner till dawn, or perhaps even late in the morning. Then the smith must be fetched to file away the bars. But all that would not be done so quickly as he could think about it. The whole charity school, just opposite, would be in motion, All the new booths, with their not very courtier-like swarm of seamen, would join them out of curiosity, and would greet him with a wild hooray, while he was standing in his pillory. There would be a mob, a hissing, and rejoicing, and jeering 10 times worse than in the rows about the Jews some years ago. Oh, my blood is mounting to my brain. 'Tis enough to drive one mad. I shall go wild. I know not what to do. Oh, were I but loose, my dizziness would then cease. Oh, were my head but loose. You see, he ought to have said that sooner, for the moment he expressed the wish his head was free, and cured of all of his paroxysms of love. He hastened off to his room, where the pains consequent on the fright the shoes had prepared for him did not so soon take their leave. But you must not think that the affair is over now. It grows much worse. The night passed, the next day also, but nobody came to fetch the shoes. In the evening, dramatic readings were to be given at the little theater in King Street. The house was filled to suffocation, and among other pieces to be recited was a new poem by H.C. Andersen called My Aunt's Spectacles, the contents of which were pretty nearly as follows. A certain person has an aunt who boasted of particular skill in fortune-telling with cards, and who was constantly being stormed by persons that wanted to have a peep into futurity. But she was full of mystery about her art, in which a certain pair of magic spectacles did her essential service. Her nephew, a merry boy, who was his aunt's darling, begged so long for these spectacles that at last she lent him this treasure, after having informed him with many exhortations that in order to execute the interesting trick, he need only repair to some place where a great many persons were assembled, and then from a higher position, whence he could overlook the crowd, pass the company in review before him through his spectacles. Immediately, the inner man of each individual would be displayed before him, like a game of cards, in which he unerringly might read what the future of every person presented was to be. Well pleased, the little magician hastened away to prove the powers of the spectacles in the theater, no place seeming to him more fitted for such a trial. He begged permission of the worthy audience and set his spectacles on his nose. A motley phantasmagoria presents itself before him, which he describes in a few satirical touches, yet without expressing his opinion openly. He tells the people enough to set them all thinking and guessing, but in order to hurt nobody, he wraps his witty oracular judgments in a transparent veil, or rather in a lurid thundercloud, shooting forth bright sparks of wit, that they may fall in the powder magazine of the expectant audience. The humorous poem was admirably recited, and the speaker much applauded. Among the audience was the young man of the hospital, who seemed to have forgotten his adventure of the preceding night. He had on the shoes, for as yet no lawful owner had appeared to claim them, and besides, it was so very dirty out of doors, they were just the thing for him, he thought. The beginning of the poem he praised with great generosity. He even found the idea original and effective, but that the end of it, like the Rhine, was very insignificant, proved, in his opinion, the author's want of invention. He was without genius, etc. This was an excellent opportunity to have said something clever. Meanwhile, he was haunted by the idea he should like to possess such a pair of spectacles himself. Then, perhaps, by using them circumspectly, one would be able to look into people's hearts, which, he thought, would be far more interesting than merely to see what was to happen next year. For that, we should all know in proper time, but the other never. I can now, said he to himself, fancy the whole row of ladies and gentlemen sitting there in the front row. If one could but see into their eyes, yes, that would be a revelation, a sort of bazaar. In that lady yonder, so strangely dressed, I should find for certain a large milliner's shop. In that one, the shop is empty, but it wants cleaning plain enough. But there would also be some good stately shops among them. Alas, sighed he, I know one in which all is stately. But there sits already a spruce young shopman, which is the only thing that's amiss in the whole shop. All would be splendidly decked out, and we should hear, walk in, gentlemen, pray walk in. Here you will find all you please to want. Ah, I wish to heaven I could walk in and take a trip right through the hearts of those present. And behold, to the shoes of fortune, this was the cue. The whole man shrunk together, and a most uncommon journey through the hearts of the front row of spectators now began. The first heart through which he came was that of a middle-aged lady, but he instantly fancied himself in the room of the Institution for the Cure of the Crooked and Deformed, where casts of misshapen limbs are displayed in naked reality on the wall. Yet, there was this difference. In the institution, the casts were taken at the entry of the patient, but here they were retained and guarded in the heart while the sound persons went away. They were namely casts of female friends, whose bodily or mental deformities were here most faithfully preserved. With the snake-like writhings of an idea, he glided into another female heart. But this seemed to him like a large holy fane. Footnote, temple. End of footnote. The white dove of innocence fluttered over the altar. How gladly would he have sunk upon his knees, but he must away to the next heart. Yet he still heard the pealing tones of the organ, and he himself seemed to have become a newer and a better man. He felt unworthy to treat the neighboring sanctuary, which a poor garret with a sick, bedridden mother revealed. But God's warm sun streamed through the open window. Lovely roses nodded from the wooden flower boxes on the roof, and 2 sky-blue birds sang rejoicingly, while the sick mother implored God's richest blessings on her pious daughter. He now crept on hands and feet through a butcher's shop, at least on every side, and above and below there was naught but flesh. It was the heart of a most respectable rich man, whose name is certain to be found in the directory. He was now in the heart of the wife of this worthy gentleman. It was an old, dilapidated, mouldering dovecot. The husband's portrait was used as a weathercock, which was connected in some way or other with the doors, and so they opened and shut of their own accord whenever the stern old husband turned around. Hereupon he wandered into a boudoir formed entirely of mirrors, like the one in Castle Rosenberg. But here the glasses magnified to an astonishing degree. On the floor, in the middle of the room, sat, like a Dalai Lama, the insignificant self of the person, quite confounded at his own greatness. He then imagined he had got into a needle case full of pointed needles of every size. This is certainly the heart of an old maid, thought he. But he was mistaken. It was the heart of a young military man, a man, as people said, of talent and feeling. In the greatest perplexity, he now came out of the last heart in the row. He was unable to put his thoughts in order, and fancied that his too lively imagination had run away with him. Good heavens, sighed he, I have surely a disposition to madness. 'Tis dreadfully hot here. My blood boils in my veins, and my head is burning like coal. And he now remembered the important event of the evening before, how his head had got jammed in between the iron railings of the hospital. That's what it is, no doubt, said he. I must do something in time. Under such circumstances, a Russian bath might do me good. I only wish I were already on the upper bank. Footnote: in these Russian vapor baths, the person extends himself on a bank or form, and as he gets accustomed to the heat, moves to another higher up towards the ceiling, where, of course, the vapor is warmest. In this manner, he ascends gradually to the highest. End of footnote. And so there he lay on the uppermost bank in the vapor bath, but with all his clothes on, in his boots and galoshes, while the hot drops fell scalding from the ceiling on his face "Holloa!" cried he, leaping down. The bathing attendant on his side uttered a loud cry of astonishment when he beheld in the bath a man completely dressed. The other, however, retained sufficient presence of mind to whisper to him, "'Tis a bet, and I have won it." But the first thing he did as soon as he got home was to have a large blister put on his chest and back to draw out his madness. The next morning he had a sore chest and a bleeding back, and excepting the fright, that was all that he had gained by the shoes of fortune.